They just renamed your retirement account after Donald Trump. The words landed like a car crash at a funeral. No one in the Democratic war room spoke at first. They didn't have to. The screen said it all. H.R. 9998, the Budget Restoration Act. Timestamp. 1 a.m., 8:42 pages. No press alert. No committee markup. No public summary. Just a silent upload into the House system while Washington slept, and a countdown to a vote scheduled at 7 a.m. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood frozen in front of her screen. Her index finger trembled above the clause. Section 512, Trump accounts, reclassification of retirement trusts. She read it once, then again, then out loud, just to be sure the madness was real. They're not even hiding it anymore. She grabbed her pen, circled the section like it was a tumor on an X-ray, and stormed out into the hallway. Across the Capitol, Hakeem Jeffries was already pacing. He'd seen it too. This isn't a budget. This is a branding operation. They're turning legislation into a cult souvenir. His chief of staff pushed a memo across the desk. Sir, it was rammed through the Rules Committee at 1 a.m. sharp. Whipped, secured, no amendments. Jeff didn't blink. Then we don't debate, we fight. Downstairs, Jim McGovern sat hunched over a stack of printed pages. Aides watched as he drew a long red line under Section 109D, firearm silencer deregulation. They slipped in silencers, he said quietly, and gutted Medicare by $500 billion. What the hell is this? A legislative ambush, he finally said, wrapped in God and guns. He looked out the window, still dark, still quiet, and somehow more dangerous than daylight. By 5 a.m., the full text had been leaked. Liberal Twitter was melting. Conservative Twitter was grinning. An anonymous MAGA account posted, "This is the new America. You'll retire into a Trump account and thank us for it." Another one added, "Silencers are freedom. Medicaid is weakness." At 6:26 a.m., AOC zipped her coat, clipped her mic to her collar, and looked at the young aide beside her. "You ready?" the aide asked. "They're not voting on a bill," she replied. "They're voting on who survives." 6:58 a.m. The chamber doors opened. Jeff entered without papers, without smile. He walked like someone entering a burning church, with purpose, not panic. Republicans sat tight, composed, pre-briefed. One or two even smirked. Jeff stepped to the podium, exhaled once, and stared into the camera. "They call this beautiful," he said. "Beat. I call it betrayal." No gavel, no motion, just silence, because everyone in that room, left, right staff, media, understood this was not a vote on a budget. This was a battle over what counted as truth. The clock struck 7:05 a.m., and the floor of the House turned into a theater. Mike Johnson walked with the composure of a man who thought history had already written him in gold. He adjusted the mic, smiled toward the Republican aisle, and began. Today would not be possible without the leadership of the most respected president in modern history, Donald J. Trump. The Republican side erupted in polite applause. A few even nodded solemnly. It sounded more like a church than a chamber. He brought us strength. He brought us clarity. He delivered us victory. This bill, colleagues, is our contract with the American people to secure that victory. A beautiful bill for a beautiful nation. From the second row, Aaron Bean stood, arms outstretched like a flight attendant. "Buckle up, America. The golden age is ready for takeoff. First-class seats for freedom, tax relief, and dignity restored. Please keep your seatbacks upright and tray tables stowed. We're headed for prosperity." The Republican side laughed. Cameras flashed. Someone actually clapped twice. Then a different sound cut through the room. Paper slamming on wood. AOC had stepped forward. In her hands, a thick printed spreadsheet. 13.7 million, she said, voice steady. "That's how many Americans will lose their health coverage under your so-called golden age. And that's a conservative estimate." She raised the document. "What you call takeoff looks a lot like ejection. You're not launching prosperity. You're airdropping despair." A murmur stirred in the chamber. Mike Johnson didn't turn, but his knuckles whitened slightly on the podium. AOC continued, walking toward the center of the room with the calm of someone about to do surgery. "This isn't policy. It's pageantry. You handed billionaires a tax parade and called it a rescue plan. You renamed retirement funds after a man who's still under federal investigation. She held up the page again. Section 512A, Trump accounts. If anyone here can explain how that improves the economy for single moms in Michigan or diabetic veterans in Alabama, I'd love to yield my time. No one moved. Johnson blinked from the back. Jeffries rose, his tie loosened just enough to show this wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning. They call this beautiful, he said slowly. But let's not confuse aesthetics with ethics. This bill is monstrous. He took 2 steps forward. It's a blood contract where billionaires gain and children lose, where silencers are subsidized but insulin isn't, where the word freedom is stamped on a weapon and scratched off a Medicaid card. Silence fell again, this time heavier. Jeffries turned to Bean. Tell me, Congressman, how does a man who spent 6 months on a state tourism board suddenly think he understands macroeconomics? Bean laughed nervously. With all due respect, Leader Jeff, I speak for the working families of Florida. Then speak to the facts, Jeff snapped. 13.7 million. You can't spin that into gold. Bean tried to interject, but Jeff raised a hand. Save it. The American people are tired of metaphors. They want doctors. They want coverage. They want truth. He looked around the chamber. And if you can't give them that, you can keep your golden age. Because what you've built here isn't a runway. It's a mass grave for public trust. Gasps audible. Even some Republican staffers stopped typing. By 7:42 a.m., the chamber's energy had shifted. Tension lingered in the carpet. The last applause had died. Even the Republican side seemed to sit a little stiffer. Then came the voice, sharp and insistent. Mr. Speaker, I request 5 minutes. I'd like to address the Second Amendment implications of Section 109. The room tilted. Representative Andrew Clyde rose from his seat, a pocket constitution visibly tucked into his jacket like a loaded pistol. I've heard a lot of talk about budgets, about Medicaid, about golden ages and mass graves, but what I haven't heard is anyone here, anyone, defend the Constitution. He walked slowly to the microphone, tapping his finger against the wooden podium. Let me quote Chief Justice John Marshall, 1819. The power to tax involves the power to destroy. And today, colleagues, that power is aimed straight at the heart of the Second Amendment. He lifted the printed bill with theatrical flair. Silencers are firearms. They reduce noise, preserve hearing, and protect freedom. And yet, we tax them. We regulate them. We stigmatize them. Section 109 restores balance by repealing a $200 tax that should never have existed. He turned toward the Democratic side. You're afraid of the word silencer because it makes you feel something. But the Constitution doesn't bend to fear. It doesn't yield to emotion. It defends liberty, plain and simple. There was a pause, a silence, not of reverence, but of calculation. Jeff rose from his seat, smooth as a stone-breaking surface. The only thing louder than your logic, Congressman Clyde, is the silence this bill guarantees for seniors without care, children without food, and workers without protection. He stepped closer, each word crisp. You speak of liberty, but you subsidize silencers while slashing health services. You say hearing is sacred, but you muffle every outcry from the hungry, the sick, and the poor. Clyde opened his mouth, but Jeff held the room. You've quoted Marshall. You've paraded Heller. Let me offer something more recent. The pain of a mother who just lost her Medicaid-covered cancer treatment. She didn't need a silencer. She needed a doctor. Clyde scoffed. This is grandstanding. You know full well the Second Amendment protects these tools. Tools for whom? Jeff replied, his voice sharpened but low. For the man in Georgia who uses a silencer on a hog farm? Or for the man in Buffalo who walked into a grocery store with one and left 10 dead? Gasps. The weight dropped. McGovern stood now, steady, voice measured like a judge reading sentence. We gave tax breaks to silencers and cut Medicaid by $500 billion. That's not patriotism. That's plunder. He looked Clyde in the eye. You don't protect freedom when you deregulate silencers. You protect profit. Clyde bristled. It's not about profit. It's about rights. Then defend the right to a hospital bed, McGovern answered. Defend the right to die with dignity. Or better yet, defend the right to live. He paused, then added, "You came here to talk about noise, but your silence on human suffering. That speaks volumes." Clyde clenched his jaw, but offered no reply. From the upper gallery, someone scribbled notes. A reporter's pen slowed. Even the lights seemed to dim. 7:58 a.m. The screens flickered across the chamber. Blue light washed over mahogany desks as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez connected her tablet to the central projector. No introduction, no theatrics, just one clause in bold white lettering on black. Section 512A. Trump accounts, savings accounts, rebranding. Clause this, AOC began, is what they slipped into the bill at 1 a.m. This is what they are proud of. She turned to the gallery, her tone sharpened. How does naming a retirement account after a man under federal indictment improve fiscal integrity? The room hushed, tense with the weight of a question everyone heard, but only one side pretended not to understand. Clyde leaned into his mic, almost triumphant. It's symbolic, he said. A new era, a fresh start for working Americans under a legacy they actually believe in. He gestured confidently toward the screen. People trust Trump more than they trust this government. That's the truth. Trump accounts represent confidence. Faith in a leader who puts America first. AOC didn't blink. Symbolism doesn't pay rent. Branding doesn't buy groceries. You've rebranded poverty, not solved it. And let's be honest, she added, no working-class family in my district asked for a savings account named after a billionaire facing 91 felony charges. The Republican side stirred. A few faces tightened, but none objected. McGovern stood now, holding a copy of the bill like evidence in a trial. Symbolism isn't sustenance, he said. You can't feed a family with a Trump logo on a bank slip. Try walking into a pharmacy in rural Kentucky, hand them your Trump-branded IRA statement, and ask for insulin. See what they say? He scanned the chamber, voice cool and cutting. What you're selling here isn't leadership. It's licensed nostalgia. A fantasy marketed to people who deserve facts, not fanfare. Aaron Bean chimed in from the side, undeterred. It's about national pride, gentlemen. Trump ignited a movement. The American people want to retire into a future they recognize. Jeff turned his head slowly. The American people want dignity. They want medicine. They want to leave something behind besides bumper stickers and bounce checks. He stepped forward, gesturing toward the projection. This isn't a financial plan. It's a monument. You've carved a name into every working-class paycheck and called it reform. Clyde attempted to re-enter. You talk like Trump's name is poison, but millions see it as power. You hate that they love him. AOC cut back in. No one hates love, but this isn't love. It's delusion. You named a retirement tool after a man who can't even file his own taxes without legal counsel. The Republican bench shifted again. And while you're naming things, she added, how about we rename food stamps after Jeff Bezos? That would be just as symbolic, wouldn't it? A ripple of laughter crossed the gallery. McGovern tapped his pen once on the desk. This clause does one thing clearly. It tells every working-class American, you are not worth protection, but you are worth branding. He turned to Bean directly. Tell me, Congressman, when did we start using the tax code as a campaign poster? Bean smiled thinly. When we realized the left had weaponized everything else. Jeff returned calmly. Weaponization happens when you build a bill on a personality cult. You didn't write policy. You wrote a shrine. He faced the chamber now. Full voice. We're here to legislate for a nation, not to crown a name. And in the corner of the chamber, the screen still glowed. Trump accounts. Reclassification of retirement trusts. Silent, stark, and damning. 8:17 a.m. The air had thickened. Even the Republican aides who had spent the morning smirking now typed slower. The chamber, once a performance hall of political theater, had begun to feel like a coroner's office. Hakeem Jeff adjusted the mic again, his voice, quiet but surgical, sliced through the air with precision honed by outrage. Let me tell you what this bill actually does. It revokes care not from the lazy, not from the dishonest, but from the working-class mother in Austin whose son was just diagnosed with leukemia, from the retired mechanic in rural Ohio who still takes night shifts to pay for his insulin. He held up a letter, not a prop, a real letter, folded and creased, from someone who had begged his office for help. It removes coverage from 13.7 million Americans. That's not a typo. That's not inflation math. That's real people with real bodies that bleed, bruise, and break. This isn't just a bill. It's an obituary. Across the aisle, a scoff came from Representative Aaron Bean. He adjusted his lapel pin and leaned forward. Let's not pretend we're pulling life support on America here. Medicaid was bloated, unaccountable. We're trimming fat, not drawing blood. Jeff turned his head slowly. You've mistaken vital organs for fat. In states like West Virginia and Mississippi, he continued, Medicaid makes up 40% of their entire health budget. 40%. Your cuts don't just slice, they amputate. Bean replied, his voice buoyant, like a man who had never entered a public clinic. States should take responsibility for their own health systems. This is federalism in action. We're empowering the states. AOC stood up without waiting her turn. You empowered them to drown. She stepped forward, tapping a finger on the side of the podium like a metronome of warning. You didn't just vote to defund Planned Parenthood. You voted to make reproductive health care a luxury item. You turned a woman's right into a line item. And let's be clear, she continued, this isn't trimming fat. This is corporate liposuction, cut from the poor, grafted onto the rich. Clyde from the back row couldn't help himself. The private sector delivers better care. Always has. AOC didn't miss a beat. Is that before or after the GoFundMe campaigns for chemo? Or the Uber rides to dialysis because we shut down rural clinics? Remind me, how much better does care feel when you can't afford the copay? Jeffer looked toward the camera, speaking now beyond the chamber, his voice shifting into something heavier, like testimony. I've heard from parents in the Bronx who sold furniture to pay for asthma inhalers. From grandparents in Georgia rationing heart pills to afford groceries. From veterans who served this country and now serve out their days begging insurance hotlines for basic care. You defunded dignity, he said, and you called it efficiency. A few Republican aides stopped taking notes. McGovern, still holding his red-line copy of the bill, rose. We talk about freedom in this room like it's some kind of souvenir you can pick up in a gift shop, but freedom without access to health care is just a flag over a casket. He held the bill up again. They killed the ACA in silence. They killed Medicaid with a scalpel, and now they're calling a rescue plan. He paused, then said flatly, the only thing this bill rescues is campaign donors. Bean, try to recover, laughed tightly. Well, Congressman, some of us believe the government shouldn't be your doctor. McGovern nodded. Fine, but you just made sure the market becomes your undertaker. 8:34 a.m. The PowerPoint screen came alive with color-coded figures, rows of numbers, arrows, a heat map of contradiction. At the center stood Jim McGovern, remote in one hand, truth in the other. Let's talk fairness, he clicked once. A map of the United States appeared, bathed in fiscal contrast. Blue states, high contributors. Red states, high recipients. No spin, just Treasury data. This, McGovern said, is where your money comes from and where it goes. He drew a red laser circle over his home state. Massachusetts contributes more to the federal budget than it receives. That's a fact. Click. He moved the dot south. Indiana takes more than it pays, and yet we're the ones called socialists. A wave of murmurs swept across the chamber. Aaron Bean laughed, adjusting his tie like he'd just won a scratch-off. That's the magic of federalism, Congressman. One nation, many partners. McGovern raised an eyebrow. It's less partnership than pipeline. Your state receives more aid per capita than mine. And still, I don't call you freeloaders, but I'm tired of being called a thief when my voters are footing the bill for yours. Clyde interjected with gusto. That's how redistribution works, sir. We invest in struggling regions so they can catch up. It's basic compassion. McGovern nodded slowly. Then let's agree on something. Compassion should cut both ways. Because while my state invests in yours, your side just voted to gut the very programs that make that investment matter. He clicked again. You didn't just cut services, you cut the return on sacrifice. Jeff stepped forward now, his voice dropping an octave. Let me be blunt. Donald Trump increased his net worth by $3 billion during his presidency, without ever releasing his taxes, without divesting from his businesses and while funneling taxpayer dollars into his hotels. He turned toward the Republican side. At the same time, your party accepted $400 million in jet diplomacy from Qatar while claiming to fight foreign influence. A pause, sharp, unyielding. You didn't eliminate corruption. You rebranded it. Bean rose again, palms open. This bill balances the budget. It holds the line. Fiscal responsibility is the foundation of a strong republic. AOC, seated until now, stood without ceremony. You hold the line for donors, not for diabetics. She walked toward the map, her finger tracing the red state, blue state divide. You scream about socialism every time a child gets a lunch voucher, but stay silent when a defense contractor gets a blank check. My constituents pay more so yours can scream louder. Clyde stood up again, louder than necessary. We're simply saying that America should live within its means. Jeff stepped in. Then tell that to the corporations you just gifted billions in tax cuts. Tell that to the billionaires who got pandemic bailouts faster than nurses got PPE. He looked directly at Clyde. You don't want America to live within its means. You want working families to live within yours. McGovern added quietly. You call it responsibility. I call it selective arithmetic. He clicked again. Here's the deficit you've left behind. Not just in dollars, but in trust. The screen filled with numbers. Deficits, tax breaks, cuts to education, all footnoted, all real. AOC crossed her arms. If this is your idea of balance, then I hope you never become a surgeon. Muffled laughter. Some staffers exhaled through clenched teeth. Being defiant to the end. We believe in merit, not handouts. Jeff didn't miss a beat. Meritocracy works when the ladder is nailed to the ground. What you've built here is a ramp for the rich and a cliff for everyone else. Silence. Then the screen went black. 8:13 a.m. The vote board blinked to life. 215 yes. 214 no. One present. The gavel hit. Silence. Brief. Electric. Snapped like a bone. Then came the roar. USA, USA, USA. The chant erupted from the Republican side like a sports crowd who had just watched their team score a touchdown. Without noticing, the field was on fire. Flags waved, fists pumped, MAGA hats bobbed above congressional suits. Representative Andrew Clyde stood with both arms raised, a grin stretched too wide to hide the desperation beneath. That's how you govern, he bellowed. That's how you put America first. Aaron Bean slapped his desk like a frat boy at a tailgate. Balance the budget, boys. Mission accomplished. But on the Democratic side, no one moved. They sat in cold stillness, the kind that says, this isn't over. This is documented. Jeffrey stood slowly. He didn't reach for the mic. He didn't raise his voice. But when he spoke, the noise stopped. You shouted patriotism while cutting nursing homes. His words hung heavy. You celebrated while mothers lost coverage. He looked across the aisle. Not in fury, but in something deeper. Disbelief. Disappointment. A mourning for the republic they once shared. But history, he said, pausing, letting the chamber hold its breath, will not chant with you. It will remember. The echo of his words rolled across the marble. AOC remained seated, her hands folded on the desk like a teacher watching a classroom cheat on a test and brag about it. You didn't win, she said aloud. You just stamped your name on suffering and called it reform. No one on the GOP side replied. McGovern stood beside Jeff now, holding the same bill they had fought through all morning. You passed it. Sure. But we read it. Jeffer turned back toward the cameras, his voice now sharpened to steel, cut with finality. The vote is done. The numbers are real, but truth doesn't vanish with applause. It waits, it records, and one day it returns. A few Republican aides gathered their papers quickly. The celebratory smirks dimmed into tight-lipped glances. One congressman whispered to another, "They're going to run this clip every election year, aren't they?" Yes. Yes, they are. C-SPAN's camera zoomed wide. The floor of the House, still vibrating from the chant, now felt colder. The noise had turned inward. Echo chambers don't hold celebration. They hold regret. Outside the Capitol, the headlines were already loading. Trump accounts. Bill passes by one vote. 13.7 million at risk. Reproductive rights gutted. Inside the building, reality settled in like dust. Jeffrey spoke once more, not to provoke, but to etch.